In 2024, a previously undocumented funeral photograph surfaced from a locked drawer in the Caledonia archive. No metadata, no donor record, just a faint inscription, EB archive only. The image was scanned, cataloged, and almost immediately removed from public access. The Undertaker's photograph. It's been called many things: evidence, hoax, memento, relic. But the deeper you look, the more it looks back. October 1915, a cold night in a forgotten American town. A group assembles for a photograph. The merchant's wife has died. The Undertaker has done his work. But this would not remain a moment of mourning. It would become a key, a threshold. Edward Browning, local Undertaker, polished, reserved, always on time. He ran his funeral parlor like clockwork. Eulogies at 10, burials by 4, silence by sundown. But the photograph from October 1915 captured more than a wake. It held the first crack in a perfectly rehearsed ritual. Later, investigators would fixate on this image, not for what it showed, but what it hinted at. A glove on the wrong hand, a coffin slightly ajar, Browning's gaze too direct. The image wasn't posed, it was staged. And the staging was only the beginning. 2 weeks later, the local constable and a forensic photographer raided Browning's business. An anonymous letter claimed, "Bodies are going missing." Inside, they found unsealed jars of chemical preservatives, human remains, not all of them labeled, a locked drawer with multiple glass negatives, and most disturbing, a ledger, labeled simply, "Service Variants." The same name, the same image. What kind of special handling required a hidden notation? The raid unearthed more than documents. It uncovered patterns, bodies marked for burial that never arrived at the cemetery. John M., 24, killed in an industrial collapse. Browning promised the family a burial, but John's remains were later found in a private anatomical collection. Sold. Preserved. Labeled Specimen JM, excellent vascular preservation. The photograph from the merchant's wife's wake, harmless on its surface, was now evidence in something darker, a funeral business where grief was a transaction, and the dead were merchandise. When police examined the original glass plate negative, they found faint markings. EB scratched above SM, small, almost hidden. A staff member later confessed, "We coded special requests in the negatives. It was safer than writing them down." And what about the back of the print? Barely visible, another line. Archive only, not for display. The photograph had been manufactured like a product, but not for memory, for record, for proof, for someone else. Historians now debate what the photograph truly captured. Was it mourning, or was it theater? Edward Browning didn't just prepare the dead. He curated death. Bodies became inventory. Photographs became documentation. Memory became currency. And what is a photograph, if not a ledger in disguise? Decades later, a historian in 1947 stumbled across the Browning case. Officially, he'd been fined and dismissed. Charges dropped. But the image? Never explained. Inside the box, one artifact stood out. Ledger C, but 4 pages, sliced clean. The last intact entry? They tried to reconstruct it, they failed. But in 1936, a letter surfaced from a donated trunk. The merchant's wife wasn't in the casket. "We swapped her. It was safer. I marked the photograph myself." No return address. No name. Just a date. 1936. In the late 1950s, fringe historians and underground researchers began dissecting the Browning photograph. One thread emerged. A possibility no one had dared suggest before. The woman in the casket wasn't the merchant's wife. The theory was disturbing in its simplicity, that another body had been used, chosen, altered to resemble her. What followed was worse. More funeral photographs began to emerge, all tied to Browning's records, each with anomalies. Reversed rings, inconsistent eye shapes, clothing labels stitched backwards. One woman appears in two wakes, 4 years apart. The implication: Browning wasn't documenting grief. He was constructing it. He said we were shaping the memory. That morning was performance. Sometimes he posed them. Sometimes he changed the faces. In 1962, an 83-year-old man named Peter Ellswick, Browning's last surviving apprentice, gave a taped interview. He described a practice rarely admitted in funeral work: posthumous sculpting, not just embalming, reconstruction. He claimed Browning kept notes, studies on degradation rates, muscle collapse, eye tension after death. But most unsettling, we take photos at intervals to watch how they held up. One time, he asked me to open her eyes. Just a little. This wasn't death care. It was experimentation. By 1915, death photography wasn't new. Families took portraits with the dead. Called memento mori, they were intended to preserve grief, to hold one final moment. But Browning manipulated it. Under spectral analysis, experts discovered something strange: dual shadows from inconsistent angles, blurred emulsion across the coffin, a visible splice in the layer beneath. A forensic artist whispers on audio tape, "This is a composite. The woman may have been inserted." The photograph was no longer a memory. It was a mask, a curated lie, orchestrated not for comfort, but control. What disturbed investigators most wasn't the uniqueness of Browning's methods, but how often they echoed elsewhere. In 1923, a funeral home caught offering quiet send-offs for unregistered bodies. In 1939, a body sent across state lines, wrong dental records. In 1951, a duplicated wake photo, same pose, different face. These weren't coincidences, they were variations. Each case had something in common: a photo, a ritual, and something off. Was Browning a singular manipulator, or a node in a network of silent professionals, all playing the same game? As more researchers probed the Browning case, a deeper question emerged, not about crime, but ritual. Was Browning a monster? Or was he simply the first to document what funeral work already was? One scholar in 1991 wrote, "Browning's photograph reveals a truth deeper than corruption, that our final image is never ours. It belongs to those who survive us, and those who reshape it." Death is memory. Memory is curated, and curation is manipulation. Edward Browning didn't destroy the sanctity of death. He revealed how fragile it always was. In 1988, an anonymous envelope arrived at the Delacroix Historical Society. Inside, undeveloped film negatives, a page of instructions, and a list of names, some crossed out. The images were processed. What developed wasn't confirmation, it was escalation. 5 photographs, 5 variants, all taken in the same moment, yet none were identical. One bore the chilling note, "Not for family. Archive only." What archive? And who were these for? In 1992, researchers uncovered the hospital records of a long-term psychiatric patient, listed only as EWW, silent since 1916, formerly employed in death industry. He drew obsessively, funeral scenes, caskets, but always the same symbol repeated: a hand separated from the body, a mourner's wrist twisted at impossible angles, disembodied gloves among flowers. Researchers connected EW to Elias Winther, Browning's final assistant, and no statement, no confession, just silence and drawings. Official records show the 1915 raid produced 3 ledgers and 1 photographic archive. But upon review, several items were missing. The original Undertaker's photograph, never inventoried, several embalming tools, undocumented, and 1 large mirror previously seen in background images. A mourner, not present in the scene. No face. Hands clasped. Standing still, as if waiting. The mirror was never recovered. And that figure? Never identified. In the early 2000s, a theory emerged on the fringe that Browning wasn't acting alone. Researchers traced repeated anomalies in death certificates, odd symbols, delayed burials, unclaimed bodies, and one recurring signature, the Thanatological Society for Postmortem Study. No records, no headquarters, just a faint insignia, a snake devouring its own tail, wrapped around an eye. A private investigator tracked a 1963 donation, the same paper stock as the EB-final envelope. The address? Ouroboros Hall, Kentucky. That location no longer exists. In fact, it never did. In 2009, a fragmentary journal surfaced, attributed to Edward Browning himself. Its contents blurred the line between delusion and doctrine. March 6, 1915. The face is not the person. The face can be shaped. Families only need comfort. April 2nd. Elias recoils from the woman's mouth. I told him, she is perfect, but he swears it moved. May 1st. We do not bury the dead. We store them. They are material. Memory is made, not preserved. To some, these were the ramblings of a madman. To others, the philosophical blueprint of a man who saw death as material and ritual as a kind of performance art. Today, the original Undertaker's photograph is locked away, deep within the Caledonia Archive of Medical Ethics. Scholars must apply for access. Most are denied. But copies still surface. One mourner is now smiling. A shadow lengthens. The coffin lid closes or opens. And in one image, the dead woman's eyes are open. Digital analysis finds no manipulation, no layering, no forgeries. And yet, the photograph seems to change, as though time isn't moving around it, but through it. Over a century has passed since Browning's final funeral. His parlor, crumbled, decayed. His name, nearly forgotten. But the photograph remains. In 2012, historian Lila Corbin began mapping the known mourners in the photograph. There were 10. 9 matched family records and clergy documents. But one did not. She was not on any guest list. No one remembered her. Her face bore no grief, only anticipation. And then they noticed something else. Her feet turned outward like she'd been posed. Some now believe she wasn't alive when the photograph was taken. In 2017, a collector of mortuary ephemera in Berlin acquired what he believed was the only surviving print of the Undertaker's photograph. Months later, he found a second, buried in a Prague estate collection. Same image, same scene, but with subtle, impossible differences. One, curtains fully drawn. The other, slightly parted. In one, the Undertaker's hand is behind his back. In the other, resting on the coffin. Even the dead woman's expression shifted, her mouth imperceptibly less closed. Both photographs were authenticated. Different prints, different chemicals, different negatives. So which one is real? Or are they both reflections? In 2020, a digitization technician working on early 20th century funeral archives found 3 unrelated photographs from 3 different cities, different years, different families, different photographers. And yet, when overlaid, the poses matched within millimeters. Same coffin angle, same floral arrangement, same mourner. A stooped man in a long coat, present in all 3. The technician later developed a realization disorder. He reported recurring dreams. I walked among the mourners. The woman in the casket looked at me, and she smiled. Some said it was burnout. Others believe he saw the pattern. Academics studying Browning's image now speak of it not as representation, but mechanism. Photography, in its earliest form, was a chemical ritual. Silver, glass, light, time. Each photo was an imprint of presence, a capturing of being. But Browning's image, it didn't just capture grief, it shaped it. One scholar writes, where the photograph is a mirror, Browning used it as a mask. Every image was a performance. Every mourner, a character. Was the ritual for the dead or the living? Two of the mourners in the original photograph were clergy, Father Albrecht and Deacon Lowe. Both supported Browning in police interviews. 2 months later, their parish burned to the ground. No cause found, no survivors. All parish records lost. Except one fragment. There is something profane in this death. We bless the wrong soul. Neither clergyman was seen in public again. Their names disappeared. Some now believe the ritual they perform wasn't a funeral, but a misguided invocation. In 2023, a defunct medical college's archives were unsealed for digitization. Among diagrams and surgical notes, a photograph. Did Browning provide cadavers to schools under false names? Was the merchant's wife merely a template, a shell? Or was the funeral the rehearsal? Across all versions of the photograph, one detail repeats: a hand, blurred, misplaced, or missing, sometimes gloved, sometimes not. In some, a hand rests on the coffin, but is absent in the negative. Patient E.W., Browning's assistant, drew the same image obsessively. A severed hand, floating above a casket, reaching, repeating. In Browning's own journal, he writes, "The final gesture must be correct. The hand must tell the story. It is the signature of grief or perversion." Some believe this is Browning's mark, a hand misplaced in every performance. In 2024, a research group experimented with image sonification, converting visuals into audio. They fed the Undertaker's photograph into the system. What came out wasn't noise. It was rhythm, a low mechanical hum, then silence, then a breath. Repeated tests produced the same result. Some claimed to hear a voice when the file was reversed. She is still. Experts dismissed it as auditory pareidolia, the mind finding patterns in noise. But then, the voice started appearing in unrelated scans. It bled into other data, and no one knows how. In 2025, an estate in Ghent yielded a variant of the Undertaker's photograph never seen before. Same composition, same room, but the coffin, empty. Scholars called it the negative ritual, a funeral with no body. Mourners performing grief for an absence. And yet, their faces remain the same. Tears, posture, sorrow. But what exactly were they mourning? Was it a funeral or a rehearsal? If the image is staged, what role does the viewer play? And when the dead are missing, who's really being remembered? In October of 1915, a casket was delivered to Browning's funeral parlor, paid in cash. No death certificate, no address, marked "not used." But it does appear, barely, in one variant of the photograph. Later, X-ray scanning of photo 10B revealed a double exposure. Beneath the image of the empty casket, another image. A second coffin, open, contents unclear, distorted, skeletal. Two images, one frame, one missing body. Browning's records include a category of service not offered to the public. Private procession, no viewing, no documentation. Who were these clients? What were they mourning? One recovered note reads, "They don't want burial. They want posture. They want the dead to look correct." They weren't grieving relatives. They were purchasing a facsimile of remembrance, a likeness to feel something, not for love, but for ritual satisfaction. In 2026, a radical theory surfaced. What if the bodies in Browning's photographs weren't the deceased, but stand-ins? Corpses altered, positioned, masked. A woman buried under the name Elizabeth C., later found duplicated in 2 other wakes. Different names, same face. The families may not have known, or they may not have cared. Grief doesn't need truth. It needs a convincing image. Experts examining all known variants of the merchant's wife discovered inconsistencies. Jawline length altered, cheekbone pads subtly applied, nose tip reshaped, hairline stitches almost invisible. She wasn't embalmed. She was built. A product of mourning, not preserved. Engineered. Every movement, every gesture, every tear. Rehearsed. What if Browning didn't just photograph funerals? What if he directed them? Like a stage play, not for the families, but for the archive. One of his diary fragments reads, "The moment isn't real until captured. Mourning is a performance. I give them what they need to see." When displayed, the Undertaker's photograph produces an uncanny effect. Silence, stillness. But not just visual, perceptual. Visitors report nausea, pressure behind the eyes, emotional dissociation, temperature drops near the frame, no electromagnetic anomaly found, no radiation. But still, it happens, as if the image isn't reflecting death, but emitting it. The room is empty. The chairs are scattered. The coffin sealed. A single glove on the floor. In the mirror, a figure, alone. This final frame is rumored, described, never found. And yet, the details repeat across interviews, testimonies, even dreams. What is it we truly fear? Death? Or the idea that the performance never ended? Though the original image is sealed, new versions continue to appear, found in old books, downloaded from corrupted hard drives, embedded in AI-generated datasets. Each version, slight shift, new shadow, a mourner's face turned. Archivists no longer speak of the photograph. They speak of versions. And some now ask, are we viewing the image? Or is the image viewing us? In 2027, a leaked file from the Caligram Psychiatric Facility described experiments conducted in the 1970s. Objective: test visual stimuli that trigger recovered memory. One image consistently produced results. Stimulus 11, the Undertaker's photograph. Patients with no known link to the image described shared hallucinations. A room filled with lilies. Footsteps behind them. A woman slowly opening her eyes. These weren't random. They were shared recall. Across dozens of subjects. No history, no connection. So whose memory were they remembering? In 2028, the granddaughter of the supposed merchant's wife, the woman at the center of the original funeral, wrote to a historical journal anonymously. Her claim? The hands are wrong. The mouth is too still. She never had that scar. Her family had mourned a likeness, a facsimile of memory. The real woman? Vanished, never identified, buried in assumption. A year later, a group of psychologists began cataloging the after-effects of long-term exposure to the Undertaker's photograph. A strange pattern emerged. Recurring dreams, same layout, same mourners, same woman. But each night the dream altered. A longer corridor, a mourner whose face slowly turns, the sound of dirt falling when no one is digging. One subject described, "The dream begins in silence. Then I hear a breath. It's not mine. It's hers." These dreams happened even among those who had never seen the real photograph. A question was raised. Is the image expanding itself? Not through reproduction, but through memory. Anatomist Horace Bland published his memoir in 2029, Buried Within, an anecdote from 1914. "A man came to me, requesting his funeral be staged before he died. He paid in full, delivered a photograph, offered precise instructions. Bland declined. Years later, he recognized the photograph. The Undertaker's image. The man? Edward Browning. He hadn't just arranged the funeral. He may have rehearsed it. More than one variant of the photograph contains a visual anomaly. A mirror deep in the background. In it, a vertical shadow. Not a mourner. Not a reflection. Not anything. Researchers began referring to it simply as the Watcher. faceless, slightly hunched, long arms. In 2030, a digital analyst tried isolating the watcher using spectral contrast imaging. The system crashed. Hard drives were corrupted. One file survived. So who took the picture? Or what did? In fringe forums, a ritual emerged. Mirror mourning. The instructions were simple. Flip the image horizontally. Invert the contrast. Recite the mourner's names backward at 3:33 a.m. Those who've attempted it claim they begin to hear the photograph. Not sound, not speech, pressure. A participant writes, "She tapped the inside of the coffin. Then she knocked behind me." One man was found dead at his desk. The image still on screen. The mirror in his apartment shattered. By 2031, the Undertaker's photograph was no longer archived as an image. It had become something else. A structure, a glyph, a threshold. Theologians and trauma researchers now debate not what it shows, but what it does. One essay concludes, "The photograph is not a relic of death. It is the pause between breath and silence. It is the ritual itself." Continuing, they've begun calling it the first frame. Because if there was a first, there must be more. In 2032, a fire destroyed an off-grid facility known only to a handful of researchers. A ritual space made of mirrors, a pile of photographic negatives, and a single surviving hard drive. Its contents? 79 funeral photographs, each unique, each staged. 42 of the bodies have no record, no family, no burial, no death certificate. Their file names? null-01.jpg, null-02.jpg, null-03.jpg. In null-23, the face is unmistakable. The merchant's wife. Identical. But the timestamp? 1928, 13 years after she died. After null-23 surfaced, a facial recognition AI was tasked with cross-referencing historical archives. What it found was impossible. The woman in the 1915 casket appeared again, in a sketch class at an art school, 1927, in a Red Cross training photo, 1930, on the margins of a wedding portrait, 1933. Same face, same proportions. But she was alive, or someone made her appear that way. So either she never died, or someone copied her. In folklore, a golem is formed from clay or dust, given form through ritual, breath, and symbol. A creation, not born, not alive, just activated. What if Browning's photograph was more than memory? What if it was blueprint, a body posed, a face constructed, a moment captured, not for the sake of remembrance, but as a ritual of creation? Each printed copy, a new invocation. Among the files recovered from the 2032 fire was a short film, silent, flickering, shot inside the embalming room. At first, stillness. Then, the coffin lid creaks open. A hand rises, not jerking, but intentional, controlled. Then, the Undertaker steps into frame. But he is inside the coffin, alive, looking into the lens. The real stock predated portable film tech. The camera angle? From inside the room, with no operator visible. No camera from 1915 could have captured it, but it exists. In 2034, a development crew in Pennsylvania unearthed an old foundation. Stonework, door frames, room layouts. When overlaid with blueprints from Browning's original parlor, perfect match. Wall curvature, pipe placement, embalming room dimensions. Impossible. But at the center, a sealed well. The building was never constructed there, but it left remains. Like memory, without event. He drew the same room again and again, but never from the camera's perspective. He drew it from behind the mourners. When asked why, he said, "I was always behind them. They never turned around." A man stands in the back row, unidentified. It was Joseph. He was in the photo all along. Browning once wrote, "They ask for burial, but burial is not the end. It is rehearsal. The grave is the camera obscura of the soul." Historians no longer debate the photograph's meaning. They debate its function. It is not a document, not evidence, not even art. It is a loop, a ritual that performs what it shows, a mechanism, a stage direction for the dead. Every viewing reenacts the distortion. We don't remember the deceased. We reanimate their mask. The decision was unanimous. The image is too volatile, too anomalous, too uncontrolled. It will never be shown again, but it was already too late. It doesn't need to be seen to exist. It only needs to be remembered. This isn't horror anymore. It's inevitability. The viewer's own curiosity is now the curse. In 2036, the lead archivist at Caledonia began suffering from visual disturbances. Faces in windows, the mourners in crowds. Their expressions, memorized, now reappeared in strangers. His final interview, "The worst part is not seeing them. It's knowing they see me. I recognize their expressions. Now they're watching mine." The last page? Just the casket and a mirror. In the mirror, a drawing of himself. Psychologists began documenting a new condition. Dissociative mirroring. Symptoms appeared in people who'd seen multiple versions of the photograph. They no longer identified with the viewer's perspective. They began to identify with a figure inside the photo, often the woman in the casket, sometimes the unknown mourner, occasionally the watcher. One patient asked, "If I'm seeing myself in the casket, but I'm alive, who's watching me look?" The image had become recursive. It no longer reflects, it observes. In every version of the photograph, one detail lingers. A single glove, fallen, folded, misplaced. Some see it as a symbol of error, some as ritual misalignment, some as a bookmark left behind by something that wants to be found again. Forensic testing showed fabric from 1915, worn seams, age-correct fibers. But no one had brought the glove into the gallery. Not the artist. Not the crew. No one. The photograph has outlived its context. It now appears in data sets, neural networks, dream archives, simulation experiments. It emerges on its own, like a glyph burned into the code. What started as a moment, a 1915 funeral image, has become an architecture, an internal structure beneath memory, mourning, identity. One scholar writes, Browning's real crime wasn't fabrication, it was revelation. He showed us that death is a story we agree to believe, a performance, a comfort ritual, and sometimes an image breaks that comfort, and something older steps in. A user posts an image. It lasts 24 hours before vanishing. No one can confirm its source or its deletion. The photograph appears identical until it isn't. The casket is gone. The room is empty. The mourners are all facing the camera, not passively, not mournfully, but expectantly, as if waiting for your reaction. Beneath the image, "We are only here because you looked." The forum vanishes. The server is wiped. The image is never recovered. By this point, your viewer should feel unsettled, stared at, and responsible.